It's time for the Bible Geek.
Robert Ehrman. We don't really know for sure what is and what is not.
Holy Ghost.
God, fantastic. God blasted him on the spot.
Ghost.
Yes, friends, it's time for the Bible Geek. Interpretation, historical, Jesus, homiletical, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Bible Geek here, Robert M. Price. I'm about to dive into loads of fascinating questions, but let me just do some shameless self-promotion here. You know, I've started a Patreon account, and mighty gratified at the generosity of Bible geeks and others who are interested in my work, and I'd like to welcome anybody else to join in. And a couple of things I have been thinking of adding. One, at a certain level of contribution, you'd be party to, I don't know, weekly or maybe bi-weekly, I don't know yet, just hammering this out, sermon of the kind I used to give in the Grail, our Sunday morning gab fest, and not pious, but thought-provoking and not theistic. And I think some of you have even heard weird versions of this in my Cthulhu prayer breakfasts. And though no Lovecraft in this. I think that ought to be interesting. I haven't written stuff like that other than those prayer breakfast sermons, tongue-in-cheek, in some years, and it's a fascinating exercise for me to do. And this would be like video. I'd be standing behind my lectern and all that stuff. Should be fun. And also would be safe since nobody can throw rotten tomatoes through the computer screen. And there are other things afoot. Our Google Hangout version of Heretics Anonymous, and oh boy, lots of fun stuff. On another front, I would like to request any Lovecraft questions be sent to me. I haven't had enough to do a Lovecraft Geek in a while, and I'd like to do one soon. And I've finished my Holy Fable chapter on the Gospel of Mark, which turns out to be a bit longer than my chapter on the Gospel of Matthew, even though Matthew is a good bit longer. Next, I'm going to dive into Luke, but got a few things to do before that, and that I think you'll all get a kick out of. Okay, with that, let's get into some exciting questions. And here's a couple from Jonathan. It says, from elementary school till college, I always studied in Catholic institutions. In our theology classes, we're taught about some prayers in Latin, just like saying Nomine Patre et Filii Spiritus Sancti, or Pater Noster, Our Father, with the typical church history and apologetics lessons. During those times, I was a devout Catholic until I read the book Who Was Jesus? Fingerprints of the Christ. This, of course, is by my beloved late friend and colleague, Acharya S., right? Which is a short and easy-to-read book that shows the problems in apologetics, textual harmonization, gospel dates, and the lack of proofs for the historical Jesus, including Thales, Phlegon, and Ben Serapion. He's going to come up later in the podcast if we get to that. Let's see. The screen blinks out and I lose my place. Interestingly, there's the discussion about the Lucan prologue, which essentially refutes the apologist notion that Theophilus is an epithet describing Christians as lovers of God. Of course, that's what it means, lover of God. In the original Greek, it says, if I can read this, Kratistos Theophilos. Gee, I'm having a hard time reading this. I got to get new glasses. Meaning that Luke is addressing a high-ranking person. Kratistos, like ruler, right? Aristocrat, and that kind of thing. named Theophilus. From then on, I got very interested in learning Greek. Every mythicist book I've read always has a discussion of several Bible verses in the original language in order to determine the context and meaning. My question is learning the original Greek, Latin, and Hebrew truly essential in learning the meaning and context of the Bible? Well, Jonathan, I know this is heresy, even blasphemy, but I don't think so. After all, you've had loads of people do the work for you. Now, I can read Greek and have translated my own New Testament, as I'm sure you know. And it is fascinating and worthwhile to know Greek. But in my experience, you could probably cover some of the same ground by comparing different translations, because you can kind of use that as almost a concordance, like or a Greek lexicon. No problem, and no reason not to consult those too. But you're going to see the range of possible interpretations if you check enough different translations, which is just a great game. I've always loved doing that, and sometimes the way people have translated things will tell you something that other books, more technical, perhaps would not. Also, I think that maybe that's all I really need to say about that. But, well, no, it seems to me if you're reading secondary sources, that is, discussions of these passages, they're going to point out the various nuances and possibilities of the various key words discussed, and they're kind of doing the work for you. You could reinvent the wheel, and I certainly am not telling anybody not to try to tackle the biblical languages. If you're a New Testament fan, Greek would be the one. I mean, I remember the day Helmut Kester told me that if I decided to go for a New Testament PhD at Harvard, I would have to know Aramaic, Coptic, Greek, Hebrew, etc. Oh boy. It can be kind of daunting, but it can be kind of fun as well, depending on, whether you like that kind of thing or not. But I don't think that need be a bar to you. You just keep in mind what the issues are and how different scholars and commentators and translators deal with it. So I think you can plunge right in. If you want to learn some Greek too, that's a great idea, but I don't think you need to master it before you can come up with credible opinions. Again, I know that's heresy, but I think I can say that having gone through the Greek myself, right? So I'm not just speaking, at least on this point, out of ignorance. Excuse me, those allergies are bothering me. Now, I presume to write about the Old Testament, though I confess I do not know Hebrew. But I think that unless there is some Indiana Jones-type secret lurking there behind and hidden behind all the different scholarly treatments of Old Testament criticism, I think I've gotten the point pretty much. I think I can, again, because of the discussions of the possible meanings of the Hebrew words and so on, I think I can venture opinions on it. And because if it's, if there's some unsuspected, radically different thing going on, I'm not the only one who doesn't know about it, that's for sure. Okay, another one. Jonathan says the King James Version is largely based on the Textus Receptus, the received text, so-called, which utilizes faulty and incomplete Greek manuscripts. Because of the widespread criticisms from scholars accompanied by the discovery of earlier codices, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, etc., the Revised Standard Version is It got released, which seems to me the translation most mythicists recommend. Let me just say why I recommend it. I like that one and the New American Standard Bible. Both of them stick pretty close to the text. Both are revisions of the Revised Version. The Revised Standard is the subsequent revision. The Revised Version is the I think 1901. That was the big revision of the King James in light of new textual discoveries, and plenty of them. So you're really reading not whole new translations there, but the King James is a good literal translation. But, of course, the language is a bit antiquated. It even was when they did the translation in 1611. But you've got, I think, pretty much accurate translations that are not overly interpretive and do not go into paraphrase. So that's in the Revised Standard Version. Now, there are a couple of them that are looser translations that I think a lot of. There's the New American Bible, and the New English Bible, and the Jerusalem Bible, and those are fascinating and well worth reading along with the others. And with the New Testament, I think William Barclay's translation is very helpful. I'm not that thrilled with revisions of these Bibles, such as the Revised English Version, which tries to supersede the New English Bible. And by the way, they're on Bible Gateway, which is just a great resource. They have every imaginable translation of the Bible there to click on and see what it says about this or that verse. But they have listed there the NEV, which is some internet translation. I'm not really that familiar with it. I'm not criticizing it. But I don't think they have the NEB, the New English Bible. I think they've got the Revised English Bible, but the New English Bible is the one I like. And that and the New American Bible, I think they just say second edition, and the New Jerusalem Bible, I'm a little suspicious of these because in the interests of liturgical reading, they've gone to paraphrase to make it inclusive, and I just don't care for that. I don't think that in a whole lot of instances they're more accurate. There's a couple of things in the new RSV, for instance, which are improvements, but on the whole I would rather stick with the more literal. But it's great fun comparing translations. Okay. However, in Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, I was reminded somewhere in this book something that goes like, the earlier we go, the more error there is. Does it mean that the manuscripts Erasmus was using came from manuscripts dated around the 3rd and 4th centuries, the dates of the Codex Sinaiticus, etc.? Well, he didn't have those available. Those weren't known yet. The oldest one they had in Greek was Codex Alexandrinus, which I think is a 6th century text. Very valuable. I saw it in the British Museum alongside Sinaiticus a long time ago. Boy, pretty exciting. And he used later manuscripts, and in a couple of passages there wasn't any available Greek manuscript, and he had to sort of translate, well, what should we say, untranslate from the Latin Vulgate to what the original Greek presumably would have been. So he had only 6 manuscripts to work from, I believe. So that is really the huge difference between the King James and modern ones. The available wealth of manuscripts, and hundreds of them, thousands if you throw in the ancient translations, the Georgian, the Slavonic, the Latin, and stuff like that. Excuse me. So he had later and much more corrupt manuscripts to go from. I believe what Bart is talking about there is that when you do textual criticism, and that is his specialty, he's a leading text critic like Bruce Metzger, Gordon Fee, Eldon Epp, and others. He says that, rightly, that there are more scribal goofs and mistakes, often insignificant ones, just the misspelling of a word, leaving out a word that you can reconstruct from other copies and so on. But there's a lot more goofs and apparently some theological changes, and more of them the earlier the manuscript. And of course the implicit reason for that is that it's not considered so sacrosanct early on. The later you go, the more reluctant scribes are to change anything, though they still do. It hasn't completely vanished, but he's certainly right. And of course that makes you have to suspect that, boy, in that tunnel period where we have no copies, you got to wonder what kind of mischief was going on. And in his great book, of which Misquoting Jesus is a kind of Monarch Notes version, the great book being The Orthodox Corruption of Scripture, he does what I think no one had done before and viewed textual criticism as a kind of redaction criticism. He called attention to tendencies in scribal alteration, not just goofs, but edits, and shows how that they reflect Christological controversies. It's really a fascinating book, and of course he writes very well and very lucidly. Let's see. Looking forward to the debate between Bart and myself in October in Milwaukee. It's really going to be, we've decided, like a friendly exchange. I really do not care for the combative nature of debates, whereas I love an intelligent dialogue, and that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, that's what I'm saying. It'll be a congenial discussion. Okay, so I think that's what he's getting at. Though there are, when you look at Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, these 4th century copies, they've been corrected. You can see, their scribes have made changes to correct goofs as they perceive them from the original scribes, and sometimes they've corrected it in light of another manuscript they had. Sometimes I suppose they just corrected just copying errors. But he's saying the whole tendency is the further back you go, the sloppier the manuscripts. That doesn't mean that given the ones we have, it becomes more difficult to tell what the original text was. That's always a challenge, but it's not like you're descending into textual chaos. There's so many manuscripts, you can generally spot the goofs. There are plenty we're not that sure about, but a lot of them are insignificant. The real tricky part is trying to figure what has been added or subtracted in that period where we don't have copies. Now, is that mere speculation? Well, no, there are kind of internal clues, things where there's sudden, abrupt interruptions of the train of thought and things like that, where you really got to wonder, is somebody replying to the author? And I think there's several places where they are, but can't prove it without manuscript evidence and so on. Okay, I also want to ask about the process of translating Hebrew and Greek manuscripts into modern English translations. How do translators decide which is the right translation? Since these earlier manuscripts don't have chapters, verses, and even punctuation, how do they do it? Well, there again, that isn't as chaotic as it initially sounds, because if you had, just imagine you had an English, you start with an English translation of the Bible, but with all punctuation and spacing taken out. It'd be a little daunting, but you wouldn't have that much of a problem. The old example given is just a bunch of letters without spaces. GODISNOWHERE. Is that supposed to mean God is now here? Great hymn, God himself is with us. Is that what it means, or does it mean God is nowhere? It could be either one, right? But generally there's no problem with that because of the context. So that isn't that much of a challenge, really. And Greek texts are now arranged with the implied punctuation and spaces and all that. And there's seldom any real doubt about that. In Hebrew, in the Old Testament, there's a little bit more wiggle room because there were no vowel points, right? I mean, no vowels, I should say, right? Same with Arabic. They're consonantal languages, and vowel points occur in manuscripts now, but these have been added by editors, and just to make reading it simpler. And sometimes it can be a different word depending on the implied vowels. And sometimes you can't really tell from the context. Usually you can. But, for instance, a whole mess of old pages of very old copies of the Quran have been discovered with different punctuation, which changes the meaning here and there. The Quran, the text is... I've heard it estimated about a third of it is just incoherent. And Muslim scholars long ago sort of created an Arabic grammar in order to make sense of the text. And, there was popular Arabic spoken, but this wasn't it. It's also, it appears that grammar was created in order to secure certain interpretations of the text. One thing that occurs to me, a Bible example, in Micah somewhere, it says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Jesus quotes that in Matthew. Old-time harmonists resisted the notion that Micah, or whoever it was saying God doesn't want animal sacrifice, which, of course, Jeremiah does say. They didn't like that. Oh, no, the Bible authors all have to agree with one another. And so they say, well, in Hebrew, sometimes you can make it sound like an absolute contrast. If A, not B. If B, not A. But really all they mean is to compare the two, that mercy is more important than sacrifice. I'm not so sure that's true. That strikes me as a way of harmonizing, that you're creating alleged grammatical rules that didn't exactly exist before theology needed them. But then again, I'm no grammarian. I don't know the history of the languages and all that. But the translation is not really all that different from translating from German to English. You just need to get used to a new alphabet. That's not very difficult. And you can pretty soon tell what's going on and what links to what and all that by case endings and stuff like that. So not that tough. I do happen to know from somebody that worked with the American Bible Society that often new translations, the committees are essentially revising old ones even when they say it's new, which kind of blurs the line between a new translation and a paraphrase like the Living Bible. And paraphrases have their place too. They're kind of like targums, the ancient Aramaic interpretive paraphrases of the Hebrew Bible. It's like a kind of a narrative commentary, but the danger with something like the Living Bible or the Message or whatever is that you're if you decide this is the Bible, this is so whatever you read here is. I was just reading something the other day by a fundamentalist preacher, Hubert Lindsay, for whom I have great respect. I don't know if he's still alive. I met him decades ago on the Berkeley campus, called Holy Hubert. This guy memorized most of the King James Bible and had a great wit. What a character. He quotes one verse from the Living Bible and then from the Good News Bible, and he seems to think that both of them are correct, like the old Amplified Bible view. If you're familiar with that, it's a new it's an independent translation. But at several points after a word, they will have in brackets a whole bunch of possible meanings derived from a Greek lexicon. And that's good. That's a helpful thing. But in my experience, people that use that tend to assume, no doubt contrary to the publisher's intent, that the word must mean all of those things at the same time, rather than it being a semantic range of possibilities. And again, that's not the fault of the people that produced it. People just need to know how to use the things. So I collect Bible translations and like to consult and compare them, even when I do know the original language. There's interesting stuff in there you might not have thought of. Okay, this from Gordon. I've been enjoying your Genesis lecture as well as your Bible Geek podcast. I've heard you address the mentions of Jesus in the works of Josephus. I'm sure you've also heard of the letter of Mara ben Serapion. An interesting name, right? Lord, son of Serapis, major god in the Hellenistic world. Would you mind addressing it on the Bible Geek? And this is he's quoting something from the Blue Letter Bible. That's also a good reference page. Some comment on this thing. The letter of Mara ben Serapion, dating from after AD 73. In the British Museum, there is a letter written during the 1st century AD by a father to his son in prison. The father compares the death of Socrates, Pythagoras, and a wise king. And it says, what advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? It was just after that their kingdom was abolished. But Socrates did not die for good. He lived on in the teaching of Plato. Pythagoras did not die for good. He lived on in the statue of Hera. Nor did the wise king die for good. He lived on in the teaching which he had given. It is very probable, end of the letter, it is very probable the wise king referred to was Jesus. The writer mentions that the Jews lost their kingdom soon after they executed their wise king. Less than 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, the Romans destroyed the city of Jerusalem, and the Jews were scattered out from their land. It's fascinating. It's difficult to date, and indeed this thing you quote doesn't presume to do that. It's just got to be after the fall of Jerusalem at some point. I think it certainly is a mention of Jesus, but it can't really be taken, as some would like, as some kind of independent attestation that Jesus existed. I mean, that whole thing is kind of a weird question to ask. Right? The writer assumes there was a historical Jesus. That's clear enough. But, as with Tacitus and Josephus, if he actually mentioned Jesus, it need reflect no more than contemporary Christian preaching. I mean, we know that in the late 1st, 2nd century, Christians believed there had been a historical Jesus. Whether there was or not is the question. Was he a myth historicized? And this doesn't really bear on that. Interesting item, though, that's for sure. This is from The Beach Rubble. Daniel 9. It's a prophecy. What does it prophesy? By the way, if you don't mind me being pedantic, I like to remind people when this verb comes up that prophesy is P-R-O-P-H-E-S-Y. You're giving a prophecy. But a prophecy, the noun, is P-R-O-P-H-E-C-Y. And what you often hear, prophesize, I don't mind it, but it's slang. It's not really a technical term, right? I don't know if it makes any difference. I kind of like the sound of it even, but that's P-R-O-P-H-E-S-I-Z-E. If it makes any difference to you, that's not scholarly prose. You wouldn't want to use that in a debate or an article or anything. Nothing wrong with it, I guess. Anyway, he says, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, and they believe that it predicts the beginning of Jesus Christ's ministry, which I find to be a neat trick, seeing as it's a prophecy that predicts a fact that we can't prove to be a fact. But leaving that alone, because, some supposed events have been generated to provide fulfillments. Okay. I notice that Seventh-day Adventists are pretty much alone in this interpretation of Daniel 9. Would you mind talking a bit about the various interpretations of this prophecy? Let's see. Let's look up Danny Boy here and see what we come up with. The Adventists have some interesting notions. Ben Carson has some interesting notions. Ooh, let's see. Let's see. And a lot of praying and sorry history of Israel. Gabriel appears. And he says, O Daniel, I have now come out to give you wisdom and understanding. At the beginning of your supplications a word went forth, and I have come to tell it to you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore consider the word and understand the vision. 70 weeks of years are decreed concerning your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place, or a most holy thing, or a most holy one. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. I guess that's why the RSV translates holy place in verse 24. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off, and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall cause sacrifice and offering to cease. And upon the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. They say that the anointed one being cut off, and I think in the King James it says the Messiah shall be cut off, but Messiah does mean, like in Psalm 2, the King of Judah, or the high priest, both of whom were anointed with oil upon investiture, and that symbolized the pouring out of the Spirit of Yahweh upon them to give them sanctity and wisdom. it's pretty clear that Daniel was written around 165 BCE, and that it is written in the midst of the Hasmonean wars against the Seleucid Empire, the Hasmoneans being Judah Maccabee and his brethren, freedom fighters against that Hellenistic Syrian Empire. And the prince to come is pretty obviously Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who viewed himself as God on earth. He horribly persecuted Jews and tried to stamp out Judaism and get everybody to worship him as an avatar of Zeus. Nice guy. And because this Seleucid Empire suddenly started having trouble to the north, they weren't able to give their full attention to suppressing the Hasmonean rebellion, and eventually just gave up and cut their losses and left, whereupon Judea was an independent kingdom for about a century until Rome took it over. So the anointed one refers to Onias III, who was killed and thus deprived of his pontificate. He has nothing, as it says. And all of the weeks and all that stuff, that results from, just earlier in the book, a reinterpretation of the 70 years that Jeremiah had predicted as the duration of the Babylonian exile. Because a lot more time than that had gone by. And so Daniel says, well, maybe it means sevens of years, 70 times 7, 490 years. And according to that reckoning, things had to happen pretty quick, and the kingdom of the saints of the Most High would dawn, which it sort of did under the Hasmoneans, but they expected the world to end and all that, and that didn't happen. Under the pre-critical reading, they thought that the one cut off was the anointed Messiah, Jesus. And the date they get is based on one of the several possible dates for the decree of Cyrus to rebuild the Jerusalem temple. Nobody knows exactly when that was. There's several rival possible dates. And so there's the attempt to make this a prophecy of a crucified Messiah, but it's just fanciful. The historical parallels are just too many and too meticulous and too specific not to refer to the Hasmoneans and the Seleucids and Onias III. In fact, in First Maccabees, there's a scene where Judah Maccabee has a visionary dream where he sees both Jeremiah the prophet and Onias III in heaven interceding for the people of Israel. And so it's pretty clear that's who it was. So not Jesus. Sorry about that, for Seventh-day Adventists. Okay. Though a lot of people, a lot of fundamentalists, pretty much all of them would say that's what it means. That it's Jesus and so on. Can you also address the ancient rabbinic curse? Like, why is there one? Is this curse real? Is everything in this country cursed? It's in the Talmud. It forbids people to read Daniel 9:24 through 27, the text of which I painstakingly copied and pasted from a random Seventh-day Adventist website. This is the curse, not the passage. May the bones of the hands and the bones of the fingers decay and compose of him who turns the pages of the book of Daniel to find out the time of Daniel 9:24-27, which is what we just read. And may his memory rot from off the face of the earth forever. One thing about this that always rang weird to me was that there were 3 or so commands that affected the restoration of Jerusalem. Which one did Daniel mean? Yeah, I'm sorry, I already mentioned that. Yeah, there's no way to know. And if a day means a year, what sort of year are we talking about? A solar year, a lunar year with a leap month? Yeah, this is like, what do they say, the wax nose that can be twisted in any direction. That's prophecy is always filled with wiggle room, way back to the Oracle of Delphi. The curse, though, must reflect the anxiety of the rabbis about trying to come up with the day for the coming of the Messiah, or the year, or whatever, because they got into trouble with messianic revolts like Simon Bar Kokhba, whose rebellion was like 132 to 135 CE or AD. He was supposed to be the Messiah, a righteous guy, but eventually he rebuilt the temple, apparently. But he attracted the attention of Rome, and he got crushed. A personage so august as Rabbi Akiva endorsed this guy as the Messiah, and whoops, you backed the wrong horse. And millennialist messianic fever got Jews into trouble too many times. And just look at Abba Hillel Silver's book, A History of Messianic Speculation in Israel. Very fascinating. Or consider, this much later, the Messianic movement of Sabbatai Tzvi. And there are several of them. It just caused so much trouble because nobody was ever right. Think of the people that followed Harold Camping. Well, they probably faced financial ruin and so on. So the rabbi said, look, let God send the Messiah in his own time. The only thing you have to worry about is trying to be as righteous as you can, because he's not sending the Messiah until we're worthy of being delivered. And so that was the rabbinic attitude. Don't look that passage up and try to determine when the end is going to come and start making trouble over it. We've had enough embarrassment over that. So I'm pretty sure that's what that's about. Scott says, what do you think are the best books or articles to read on Exodus? Well, let's see. The minimalists are probably the best. I would take a look for In Search of Ancient Israel by Philip R. Davies. That's a great one. Another terrific one is Giovanni Garbini. What is that? Oh, boy. What the heck's the name of that book? History and Ideology in the Old Testament or something like that. But it's Garbini, Giovanni Garbini. That's really excellent. And any of the books of Thomas L. Thompson on, just take a look at him on Amazon, and I have trouble keeping the title straight. I guess I'm just going senile, but that would be great. L. Sprague de Camp wrote an essay toward the end of his life about the mythical character of the Exodus, but I don't know where the heck that appeared. An older book that is great and takes a somewhat different approach. It assumes there was some kind of historical basis for it, but it doesn't really matter whether you think that or not. Martin Noth, N-O-T-H, he wrote a book just called Exodus for Westminster's Old Testament Library series, and he deals with it passage by passage and gives a source analysis, a tradition breakdown as to where this and that came from, and that's great stuff. There's one that replaced that volume, unfortunately, in the series by Brevard Childs, also called Exodus, I think. I mean, that's at least in the title. He takes this canonical view where he's much concerned to trace out the history of interpretation of this, as if that's all some kind of canon. I really have no use for that. He was a major scholar, but I just find that dripping with confessionalism. I'd rather go with Note on that. Let's see, who's this one from next? Evan. The 14th chapter of Genesis features Abraham going to battle and routing various kings after his nephew Lot has been captured. This picture of Abraham, the powerful warlord with 318 men at his disposal, doesn't sit easily with the simpler lifestyle he's depicted as having in the rest of Genesis. In addition, verse 13 refers to him as the Hebrew, a term which usually in the Bible is not used to identify Israelites except by foreigners, righto, even in the New Testament. In light of these facts, E.A. Speiser, one of the great critics, in his commentary suggests that chapter 14 was an independent, foreign, quote, quasi-historical, unquote, document that was imported into the rest of the Genesis material. And he takes this as evidence that Abraham was a real historical figure, quote, who was attested in contemporary sources. What do you think of this claim of historicity, and what do you make of the provenance of Genesis 14? Well, it's difficult, notoriously, to assign a source to this. It's odd also in that it has this business about Abraham meeting Melchizedek and so forth, and that alone might make you wonder if this comes from a different Middle Eastern source, if it somehow has to do with pre-Israelite Jerusalem, because Melchizedek is made the king of Salem, which seems to be intended as the same as Jerusalem, when it was a Jebusite city. The Deuteronomist has both Joshua and David conquer it, so there were all sorts of different stories about that. But Psalm 110 speaks of the royal priesthood of Jerusalem, with the king becoming a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And it's been theorized that this ritual office, which the Deuteronomic school didn't like much, they really did not want kings to have priestly duties, that this may represent an earlier Jerusalemite/Jebusite view of things. Well, if Melchizedek is that important, yeah, it could be that this comes from that stream. But it's like Balaam the prophet in the book of Numbers, not an Israelite, right? Though nonetheless a true prophet, according to the narrator, to whom Yahweh speaks. We have a non-biblical tablet which gives an oracle of Balaam. Did Balaam actually exist? He might have, but that's just not sufficient evidence to say that he did, like the various prophecies attributed to Merlin and so on. So you can't really tell. But Speiser, I think, is probably not saying this comes from outside the Middle East. And so he could be a legendary figure, which I think he must have been anyway for various reasons, that he was a figure shared by several of these kindred groups, like the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Hebrews, and all that, Israelites. And so I don't really think that proves anything. It really looks like, since Speiser's day, that any so-called evidence for the patriarchal narratives being historical, which Albright and others claim they were, it's really crumbled. And I don't really think that proves anything. It's from the same cultural sphere anyhow. Like, did Samson exist because he looks to be another version of Nergal and Hercules and so forth? Those aren't exactly independent attestations of a historical figure. Let's see, another one from Evan. Are there any theories about the identity of the man carrying a jar of water in Mark 14:13, who is to lead the disciples to the room for the Last Supper? The New Oxford Annotated Bible suggests that he is a prearranged signal who will be noticed by the disciples because carrying water would normally have been a woman's task. Is there another, perhaps allegorical meaning to be found here? Well, you always got to wonder if he's supposed to be Aquarius. This is the dawning. By the way, my story of that title has just been published in Saega, a Scottish fanzine. I'm sure it's on every newsstand. That makes sense to me, though. I can't help thinking it may be supposedly divine providence, and as the word would imply, providing for Jesus so that he need not make any advanced arrangements. Who would he have made them through except these guys he is sending to meet this guy? Right? So I think there's that spooky element, just like how does Jesus know there is this donkey tied up in the street that they're going to see immediately, and that they should ask the owners if they're going to take it, and if asked, what the heck you think you're doing? What the heck you doing? That they would say, oh, well, the Lord needs it, he'll bring it back, and so on. How does he know that? If he's made arrangements beforehand, wouldn't he have made them through the disciples? So I have a hunch it's supposed to be miraculous provision. But I think it is a totally legitimate way of reading it to suggest that, yeah, he does have prearranged signal, though I'm not that certain that you can say that you wouldn't see guys carrying water around. At this, even if it's an anomaly, it might simply mean that whoever told the story was unfamiliar with the cultural milieu. I think a lot of these oddities in the Gospels, like the shepherd who sees one of his sheep is missing and leaves the other 99 to go look for it, leaving the poor sheep open to wolves and lions coming to get him while he's gone looking for the one. Would any shepherd do that? Well, no. And would anybody who knew anything about what real shepherds do tell a story like that? Probably not. So I think this may be another one. I mean, if that's even accurate, if women were the only ones that carried water, it may not be an authentic story anyhow. And finally, in Luke 1:24, Elizabeth conceives a child, and then for 5 months she remained in seclusion. Why this long confinement? Do you know if this was customary for pregnant women at the time, and if so, why? One commentary I found suggests, quote, her seclusion seems to be motivated by shameful childlessness. Unquote. But it seems strange to seclude yourself because of childlessness at the very moment when you have finally conceived a child. So is there anything to be said about this little detail, or am I looking for exegetical work where there is none to be done? No, that is a good question. I wouldn't read a whole lot into it, though. It just seems to me, though, that Luke takes this for granted. I don't think he's really calling attention to it. But in a way, it's possible it's just a gimmick to not to allow him not to have to do anything with her until Mary gets there, right? And summary in a sense rather than a scene. But I don't know. It doesn't seem to be offered as something to puzzle over. But I don't know what the customs might be that would indicate that. I know could just be for the sake of safety, but I don't really know other than that. I mean, generally in areas like in the Jewish sections of Alexandria, women didn't go out in public unless they really had to. They stayed in the inner room and all that. So, but I don't really know. I mean, people are mighty happy when they see she is pregnant, just like Sarah. So I don't quite get that either. But if there is a real important answer, I don't know what it is. If anybody else does, please let us know. Well, I better get going, but I'll hopefully be back together with you again soon on the Bible Geek, and thanks for being with me on this one.